We're going to look at the OpenAI Codex releases and see if they're a worthy replacement for Cursor and Claude Code. And not just that, we're going to build a micro-SaaS idea, a outfit try-on widget using Google's just released Nano Banana, which is super powerful at image editing. So OpenAI are tackling all fronts here and giving us a lot of options. We now have an IDE plugin, we have the Codex CLI, and we have Codex Cloud. So this is a really useful ecosystem and something similar to what Cursor have as well. So what OpenAI are promoting here is a kind of unified environment. You might work in the IDE when you're working on human-in-the-loop code. You might involve the CLI if you're wanting to work agentically and have it run on a server, and you can have all of them working together or offload one to the other. This is very similar to what Cursor offers with its IDE, its CLI, and its background agents. So not unlike Cursor or GitHub Copilot, you can now add Codex to your pull requests in GitHub. And we have some updates to the Codex CLI. So we're going to take a look at that and see what's changed as well and how it compares in relation to Claude Code. Just a quick one, guys. If you're looking to become an AI native developer with the ability to build apps without writing any code, you should check out the Build with AI Switch Dimension course. There is a ton of modules in there, and I just introduced a whole new section on Claude Code to help you get up to speed really quickly. So first up, let's look at the Codex extension. I've got Cursor open here, but this will work in VS Code and any fork of VS Code like Windsurf, etc. So just go up to your extensions here, and then we're going to type in Codex. And then you just click on this to install it, and then it's going to appear here on your left-hand side. So once it's open there, you can just drag it over to the right. That's usually where I keep my agent. So click on this button to start a new chat. If we click on this, we get a task history. So this extension has a task list just like you'd have in Claude Code or Cursor, and that's also been added to the Codex CLI as well. Down here, we can add context of any files we want to add in, and we can now add images as well. You can also add images to the Codex CLI now. And we have this button here for auto context management. So it will decide what recent files it should pull in. So we have three different modes. We have chat mode. So this is kind of like a planning mode where you just want to talk to the agent about your code, but it doesn't necessarily implement anything, and it requires approval to run any kind of command or an edit. Then we have agent mode. It's able to jump ahead, think agentively, and read your files, make edits, run greps, all those different things like that, and run commands in the workspace. And then we have full access mode, so it can actually go and search the internet and edit files outside the workspace. It seems to be like the dangerously skip permissions mode in Claude Code or the YOLO mode in Cursor. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing. You can set different levels of reasoning effort. You have minimal, low, medium, and high. Originally, I thought these reasoning efforts mapped to particular models like the mini, nano, or high models, but it doesn't seem to be as simple as that. It's stated in the documentation that it's the amount of reasoning effort that is applied. So it's hard to get an idea of how these are priced when you're working with them. And there is a little bit of work to be done on OpenAI's side to understand the pricing and the level of allowance that you get for your $20 or greater per month. It seems to be they're going to run this very similar to how Claude Code is running it. You get a certain allowance over a certain amount of time, and then it resets. So also like Cursor, you have a local mode and then a cloud mode. So in Cursor, it would be basically just the local IDE agent or the Cursor CLI. And then if you're sending to cloud, it would be the background agents. So in this case, Codex Web is your background agent to run things in the cloud. So let's see how it goes. So I'm going to just say set up an XJS project with ChadCN styling and Lucid icons in this folder. So straight away, I think the UI is nice here, nice and clean. We've got this working going on here, explaining exactly what's going on in the background, and we can expand each one of the thinking steps. I actually really like this about GPT-5. It explains how it's thinking through different problems. So if you actually read through this stuff as it's being generated, you can actually catch the model making a mistake before it does. And it also helps you understand how it arrives at different decisions. So we can set the permissions now by saying run this time or run every time. So I'm going to let it run every time. We can see it's running through all the different tasks here. And if I look at my task history, I can see that we're currently on this task at the moment. So it's finished working and it successfully completed those steps in a reasonable amount of time. Pragmatically, normally what I do is I just run those commands myself. I can do it in a tenth of the time, but I just wanted to get a feel for how this interface looks, and it is quite nice here. And you can go and click on individual pages to take you through those, and then we can see the files that are changed here. And this is really clean and really nice. I really like the UI. So I really like the UI here, and we have options between looking at what's changed. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm just going to spin up a server here just to see if all that works. I'm going to say npm run dev in the terminal here. Perfect. So simple task, but it worked fine. So now we have a basic project set up locally. We can also set that up in the cloud via Codex Web. So let's just connect it here. So I've selected my GitHub organization here and I've put in the repository. I'm just going to click that. I'm going to switch on code reviews. I'm going to allow internet access just while I'm setting up the environment. Now, bearing in mind that you are open to prompt injection when you have internet access on, so just be wary of this. And I'm just going to hit create environment. So now essentially I have two different places where I can run my commands and run my agents. This is very similar to background agents in Cursor. So for example, I can just click on the dictate icon here. Let's add a hero section to our main page on the Next.js app. If I was working on a more established app, I would pick a different branch, but we're just going to work on main here. And then you can actually click the amount of versions that you'd like to have developed. So we're going to go with 2 here and check it out. So you have 2 different options here. Again, you can ask if this is a request, and then you can actually just go ahead and hit code. And when I click on a task, I can see the 2 different versions and the different environments that are spinning up. So we can go back and check on that in a second. Now, if I wanted to interact with either one of these versions, I can actually click on this button here and it will open that for me in Cursor. This is again very similar to how Cursor works with background agents and the IDE. I feel like OpenAI are taking a lot of cues from the Cursor workflow here. So once the work is complete, we get this kind of view. Essentially, we can see what has been added. We've got the 2 different versions and a summary of the work, and I can see what was applied. So I can imagine if you were wanting to check out multiple different design approaches for a web page, you could have 5 different versions and choose the best one. Or if you're looking to solve a particularly complex problem, you could have multiple different versions applied. You're using a lot of tokens here when you're doing this, but I think this is a pretty cool implementation. So let's say I'm happy with version 1. I can go up and either create a git apply, copy a git patch, or just go and create a PR. And if I go and hit view PR, you can see that a pull request has been created and I could go and accept that then if I was happy. Okay, so now let's check out the updates to the Codex CLI. So the Codex CLI, again, being very similar to Cursor CLI and of course Claude Code. Not quite as advanced, but it seems to be getting there. So just copy this command, npm install global OpenAI Codex, and then just go back over to Cursor again. We can open up a new terminal here. And then I can just paste in that command and hit return. And then to run it, we just type in Codex. So before we jump into using the CLI, you might be asking, what's the deal with all these CLI tools? We have a tool like Windsurf or Cursor, or now this extension of Codex. It's very visual. It's in the IDE. Why do we need all these different CLIs? And essentially, here is my take. So CLIs, what they do is they offer a more agentic take on development. So you can basically take them, you can run them in any IDE, in any terminal, you can run them in Docker, you can run them on servers. You can actually set them up via an SDK so that you can run different commands and have them work in multiple different instances and agents. So they're just a whole lot more flexible. Also, some people like working in a CLI. They tend to be a lot faster and have lots of advantages in terms of extensibility. Now, in terms of UI and user interface, they're not quite as friendly. So if you're starting out in development, or you're looking to prototype or build without writing code and are a little bit overwhelmed by the terminal, I would recommend using something like Cursor or using Codex or Roo or Klein built into an IDE as a starting point. If you've got a different take on CLIs versus IDEs, love to see that in the comments. Okay, so in the Codex CLI, the first thing I want to do is hit /init. So what that's going to do is create an Agents.md file. So that's very similar to the Claude or Gemini.md. So Agents.md is a new standardization for agents file, similar to how we would use a README. It acts as context for your code base and any particular rules and approaches that you take. And this standardization of the file name of agents.md means now that we can potentially move between multiple different types of tools. So you can see there's multiple different companies that have signed on. but I love to see this level of standardization. What I like about GPT-5 is that you do get a train of thought being shared, and I've actually found this really useful in development. And the UI here is actually pretty nice with some nice icons added in. If we type / here, we can see all the different commands that we have available. So if I hit model here, I can choose, just like I can in the extension, between minimal, low, medium, and high. We can set our approval, start a new conversation. We can compact our context. Now, adding MCPs is a little bit different from how you do it in other CLIs with a mcp.json file. So I'm just going to show you that quickly because I found it hard to find documentation on this myself. Maybe it'll help you. So you'll want to find your settings directory. So let's change to your home directory if you're in a Mac. So just cd and tilde, and it'll bring you straight back there. So we want to change into the directory .codex. And then if we just do ls to see what's in there, you'll see that we have a config.toml. So then you can just open this config.toml by typing nano config.toml, or just go and find that file in cursor and open it yourself. And you see you've got all your config details here. And adding an MCP server is as simple as what I have here. You type in MCP bright data, and then you've got your command, your arguments, your environment, etc. Just add them in like that, one on top of another, and then it should be listed. Now you will have to restart your CLI in order for them to be listed, but then you should be good to go. So I used Codex CLI to build out a project yesterday, and I have to say it was a good experience. But that being said, it is still early. And if I was to compare it side by side with Claude Code is still miles ahead. It has sub-agents, it has hooks, and many more subtle commands that are really just quite useful as you work in a CLI. But that being said, don't forget how fast and how big of a company OpenAI is and how fast they move. It'll be very interesting to see what they bring to their CLI over the next couple of weeks. When you consider pricing of Claude to GPT-5 and the fact that their models are achieving similar parity, I think OpenAI are really going to give Anthropic a run for their money. So the first thing I want to do is create a basic e-commerce page as the foundation for this prototype we're developing. So I have my prompt here. If you want to take a look, pause it, and then I'm going to hit run here. But I'm going to switch up to high reasoning. So this is the output we got from GPT-5, and it was clever enough to go and pull in some Unsplash images just to populate them. Now, some of them didn't work out, but actually this works out pretty well. This is just a linking issue, I think. So good start. So out of interest, I set up the same project with the same configuration and ran exactly the same prompt in Claude Code just to see what the output would be as a comparison. So in terms of output and design, very similar, very comparable. So if we take a look at what we got from ChatGPT, women's collection, filtering, quick view appears over each image with this little heart as well. And then if you look at what we got from Claude, we have the same type of filtering, and then we have a quick view appeared. But I suppose GPT went that one extra step to bring in the Unsplash images to populate the design. So kind of think it's a bit of a draw here in terms of design. Okay, so next up, I'm going to add in a slide drawer because this is where we want to put in our tryout tool, the ability to be able to see whatever outfit is in there. I'm going to drop that down to medium, I think, and just going to run that. So this is what we got from ChatGPT. It gave us the same kind of to-do list and the output here. And it was really actually quite quick. So let's take a look at the changes. So if I jump over here and click try on now, we get this nice overlaid slide on from the left. And looking at the Claude version, we have an overlay here for try on, but then it completely blackens out the background here. I think I prefer the GPT-5 version. And yeah, looks okay. It's not too bad. And let's close out of that. Then I'm left stuck here and I don't know what to do. So a little bit of a fail here from Claude. Okay, so I put in my prompt here. Let's remove everything from the slide. You can pause here if you want to take a look at what's there. And actually, let's just crank this up to high reasoning effort. We are using Claude Opus in Claude Code, so it needs to be a fair comparison. Okay, so both agents have finished. Let's take a look at the outputs. So if we look at the ChatGPT version, I click try on. And if we try and click upload here, and then I click try on outfit, perfect, or change photo, I can upload a different one. Okay, perfect, that makes sense. So let's get rid of that one now. Let's look at Claude's version. So if I click try on here, okay, we can drag and drop in our image, click open, and then try on outfit. So yeah, pretty comparable. Maybe I like this one a little bit more. Okay, so the other really big release this week has been the release of Nano Banana, aka Gemini 2.5 Flash Image. So this model was being tested under the name Nano Banana for a week or so before it was actually released and announced that it was coming from Google. So it's Gemini 2.5 Flash Image, and it's actually available via API so that we can use it. And it's really great at product placement, image swapping, all that kind of stuff. And you can see it's ranking really high in LM Arena compared to other image-based models. You can get access via Google AI Studio to give it a whirl, or via Gemini, or through the API. So we just need to go and get ourselves an API key if we want to work with it in any kind of an app that we create. So go to get an API key. It gives you some quick start guides here. Go create an API key that you're going to copy, and we need to copy this into our .env environment variables so that our app can use it. So over in our project, we're just going to create a new file, and we're going to call it .env.local. And in there, we're going to paste in our API key. So the other thing I'm going to do is copy the API documentation directly from Gemini. I could use something like Context 7, but I just find this a whole lot more reliable. It's up to date and it's exactly what I want. So a quick Google search will give me this. And then I'll add that as part of my prompt. I'll just paste that in there. So if you can see my prompt now, I'm saying I want to use the Gemini Flash 2.5 image preview model to take an output. Use the prompt to place the output on the person. I've added an API key as Google Gen AI API key. So you see I've added that in here to .env local. And the reason I'm telling it what the key name is here, because the model can't see into any .env files for security. And then I'm just giving it a link to the docs as well. And in this case, I'm just going to switch it over to agent full access so it can actually browse the web in this case. So, okay, we're in a good spot. And oh, I must actually save where I am. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing with Opus. Okay, so it looks like Claude finished first. So let's go and check that out. So with Claude, it doesn't do anything at all. And I don't get any kind of input from the terminal to say what's wrong. And the same when we look at Codex, we get a Gemini request failed. So I'm going to have to add a little bit of logging to understand what's going wrong in both cases. When you're getting these vague server errors like a 500 and 502 and there's no further information, what I would normally do is just go and ask the model to add some logging in the terminal so we can see a little bit more about what's going wrong, and that will help me and help the model figure out how to correct it. So I'm adding a little prompt in here and I'm going to run that. The problem with Claude is it's actually calling the wrong model. It should be calling the preview version. And if I look at Codex version, it's actually calling the almost right version of the model, but it's not calling preview. So I'm just going to correct that in both cases. So two things I had to change in order to get it working. It seemed like it only works well with images where the face is obscured or you're not seeing the face. Therefore, it doesn't trigger any kind of warnings with the Gemini Flash model. And then I also did a little bit of a cleanup to increase the sizing of this here. So let's try and upload our picture here. And the model here, you'll note I had to remove the face in order for it to work. And boom, here we have the output. Now for the caveats. This didn't work for me all of the time. The problem is the Gemini model is heavily censored, and anything got to do with swapping clothing is going to fire some kind of censorship. I had to apply some tricks like making sure the face was obscured so that it would work well. And even at that, it only worked every couple of generations. It gave me a refusal. But the good news is that this is now possible via a model. And I think in the coming weeks, if not months, we're going to see other providers launch their own versions. They might have open weights, they might be uncensored in a way that will allow us to do better swaps. So maybe something to experiment with in terms of product swapping, thumbnail generation, lots of different ideas you can apply using Nano Banana. This could be a really great Shopify plugin you could resell. Lots of different potential here. So after a couple of builds, how am I feeling about all these new tools from OpenAI? Well, I'm actually really quite impressed. I think OpenAI have really been cooking here and they've played a lot of catch up. The next thing is the CLI. Now the CLI at a starting point, it's still pretty basic, but it is working quite well for me and has some nice features. I can see within a couple of weeks, a couple of months, it might hit feature parity with the likes of Claude Code, making it really quite compelling. Then we have the introduction of the extension into VS Code or Cursor or whatever IDE you want to use, which in my usage, as you've seen in the video, is actually really quite good. What I love is it's one tool across all the spectrum of needs that I have: an extension, a CLI, and some web agents. What we're getting from Anthropic right now is a really great CLI in the form of Claude Code and the great model series in the likes of Opus and Sonnet 4. However, the pricing is a big consideration here, and OpenAI is just so much cheaper than Anthropic for developers. And if you're in an enterprise scenario where you're buying multiple seats, or you're a hobbyist and you can't afford these big bills like a 200 max plan, OpenAI really is a very viable option. But in terms of getting the job done, both seem to have a parity for just getting there. They do things in different ways, but in terms of my speed to reach a conclusion in my tests, Anthropic and OpenAI are getting me there pretty much at the same time. So I like to be opinionated on this channel, and if I was only going to be able to pick one at this point in time, I would probably go with OpenAI, purely around the pricing and the spread of offerings that they have. Now, that being said, I'm sure Anthropic is thinking about its own extension and its own cloud agents that it's going to bring to the market as well. But will they be able to match pricing? And the other thing is, there are lots of other different models coming out, like I showed previously, that are really quite powerful, like the Quen series. We've got Grok, we've got so many other models that are going to show up, like DeepSeek, that are going to be much cheaper to run than both OpenAI and Anthropic. And that's where a tool like Cursor might suit you, because it offers all of the things that we just talked about. It has background agents to run in the cloud. It's connected to your GitHub, so it can review your pull requests. It has its full-on IDE that is really state of the art, and it has its own CLI, which is a little bit buggy but is improving all the time. But the big thing here is I can select any different model that I want. But generally how it works is you spend your $20, and depending on what model you're calling, you get charged at that API's cost. If you've got $20 of usage and you're running a low cost model, it's going to go a hell of a lot further for you. That's where it stands at the moment. It's still really early stage. All these tools are working in exactly the same way. Their CLIs work in the same way. Their agents are working in the same way. You learn it in one tool and it seems to apply across all the others in terms of feature parity. So I wouldn't be too worried about picking a wrong tool at the moment. Just play with them all, or pick one and work with it as much as you like. And then if something better comes into the market at a later stage, the switching cost isn't going to be that high. We're just having a ton of fun playing with all of these new tools. So I'd love to get your opinions on what tool you're currently using and where you're having success in the comments. It's really helpful to me and to others who watch the channel. Thanks, and see you next week.